We all remember the famous and iconic moment in Thriller Bark where Zoro took all of Luffy's pain. Well, actually, now that I think about it, I don't remember anything happening at all. That's weird. So I guess nothing happened. Okay, all jokes aside though, Zoro's nothing happened moment is arguably his best scene in One Piece. So given that information, I wanted to find the equivalent of that moment for every other Straw Hat crew member. Now, obviously, most of these have nowhere near the same amount of impact as Zoro's, and to be quite honest with you, it was very difficult to even find some that were somewhat similar. And for a few of them, I'll say that they're a pretty big stretch to compare to the nothing happened moment, but I tried my best. There are some good ones, some really good ones, and we're going to start off with one of them. So the first Straw Hat that we'll be doing is Robin. To be honest, Robin has a few moments that are really good. For example, her sacrifice in Water 7/Enies Lobby, that might be the best one-to-one comparison to Zoro because she sacrificed herself for the crew. Zoro sacrificed himself for Luffy, so there's definitely a comparison there, but that's not what I'm choosing because in terms of physical pain and the phrase nothing happened, we're going to look at a specific scene in Dressrosa. Up on Flower Hill towards the end of the arc, we have Diamante, Kyros, Robin, and Rebecca all on this hill. Diamante and Kyros are fighting when Diamante does something called metal rain, where he basically makes metal spikes rain from the sky. In order to protect herself and Rebecca, Robin uses her devil fruit ability to make an umbrella with her hands, and it seems like she's doing a good job protecting the both of them, but it turns out she was really only protecting Rebecca. We see at the end of the fight how bloody Robin had gotten because she was using her power to protect Rebecca more than herself, and I think this is a very underrated moment because Robin didn't mention how bloody and hurt she had gotten because it didn't matter to her. All that mattered was that Rebecca was safe, and I think this is a really good comparison to Zoro's nothing happened moment. Now before we continue, I want to clarify that these are not like clutch moments. These are moments where the Straw Hats sacrifice something or themselves to save others. I just feel like we can easily confuse the two, and I wanted to put that out there and also say that Zoro's moment showed a lot of loyalty, so that's what I was looking for when choosing something for each Straw Hat. So moving on to the next character, which is Usopp. The guy's known as a scaredy cat. I mean, he's afraid of everything, so he's not really a guy who's going to jump into harm's way in order to save others. He's more likely to hide in the corner. He also has can't go on that island disease, which is very contagious by the way, so you don't think of him as a super loyal guy, and he's not. He did leave the crew at one point. However, you can't say he was sacrificing a lot to save the Mary. That's where the argument comes in. He was willing to give up his friends and his crew members in order to stay by the Mary side until the end. So it definitely was a good moment for his character in terms of saving the Mary, but also as in loyalty to the crew, he didn't have much of it because he left the crew. It's kind of a double-edged sword because he betrayed his friends by leaving the crew, but also showed how loyal he is by not giving up on their ship. The same as Robin, I'm not picking this moment. Instead, I'm picking a moment that really shows off his loyalty to Luffy. And this moment actually isn't even a canon event. It happens in the One Piece movie Stampede, where we see Usopp trying to carry Luffy to safety and he's struggling because he's worn out, he's tired, he's been fighting, but he doesn't give up. He really wants to save Luffy. And a wooden beam that's on fire starts to fall on Luffy, and we see Usopp step in front of him to stop this beam from falling on Luffy, which is a very powerful moment for him, and especially since we know his character is known to not be the bravest. Like I said, it's not exactly like the nothing happened moment, but it does show Usopp's loyalty, and that's what Zoro's nothing happened moment was about. He was showing his loyalty to his captain. So that was Usopp. Now let's move on to Brook, the musician of the crew, and he's one of the Straw Hats that I had a lot of trouble coming up with something that's the equivalent of nothing happened. It doesn't really have any big sacrificial moments yet in the story, and nothing really made sense to fit into this narrative that I'm trying to make. However, I did settle on something that shows how loyal he is to Luffy and how much he believes in his dreams to become king of the pirates, and that's in the Whole Cake Island arc. And Brook had a lot of great moments in Whole Cake Island, and I think the one that fits the narrative of this video is when he fights Big Mom in the treasure room. In a time when Brook should have been afraid, he wasn't, and he willingly took on Big Mom in a fight knowing his chances of survival weren't great. He was willing to put his life on the line, and while he may not actually have sacrificed himself, he was willing to do it, and it's the thought that counts in that instance. So that's Brooks. Now let's move on to the cook, Mr. Sanji. Sanji being in the monster trio and being one of the top officers in the Straw Hats puts him in a position similar to Zoro, where he has a lot of moments that show his loyalty to the crew. However, we all know he's not one of the most loyal members because he did try to leave the crew. Now I will say, on the outside, Sanji leaving the crew is not a good look, but we have to remember, in Sanji's mind, he thought he was sacrificing himself in order to save the crew. That's what he was led to believe, and that's what Big Mom said to him. It's very similar to Robin leaving in Enies Lobby, and just like Robin, that's not his nothing nothing happened moment because a lot actually did happen because of that. Sanji's moment is actually very similar to Zoro's because he does take someone else's pain. During the Skypiea arc, when the Straw Hats are fighting Enel, Enel is about to electrocute Nami and Usopp when Sanji jumps in the way, taking the damage. This was him sacrificing himself, or not really sacrificing, but taking the damage for his crew members. And it's also just a very awesome moment because of his line afterwards.
I was looking for a light. Appreciate it.
That is just so good, and that's what makes this his nothing happened moment. Now, speaking of Nami, let's move on to Nami. And to be honest, for Nami, I didn't want to pick out one specific moment. You might be thinking of some moments in your mind, but Zoro's moment in Thriller Bark was about loyalty and sacrifice. So for Nami, I kind of just want to focus solely on the loyalty part of that. We haven't necessarily seen her sacrifice a lot in order to save the crew, but I think on the loyalty scale, Nami is second behind Zoro, even above Sanji, because so many times we see her sitting by Luffy's side when he's injured or hurt or just not feeling well. Like I mentioned Whole Cake Island earlier with Brook and Sanji. Another mention in Whole Cake Island is when Luffy is fighting off Cracker or fighting off the entire army. Nami's by his side, sitting by his side, making sure he's okay the entire time. We also see her sitting by his side up on a cloud in Skypiea, and it's just a recurring theme. We see it so many times. I think it happened in Alabasta as well, and probably several other arcs. She is unbelievably loyal to Luffy and is always by his side no matter what, and I think that is what I want to put as her nothing happened moment, is just all of those combined. Even her reaction to Luffy in the newspaper at Marineford when he was all alone shows her loyalty because she was genuinely sad. So that was Nami. Now let's move on to another member, Frankie. Like Brook, I found a difficult time searching for a moment from Frankie that gives off nothing happened vibes. Something I thought about was when he defended the Sunny from Baby 5 and Buffalo and Punk Hazard, but I don't know that I necessarily wanted to choose that, and that's why I settled with his fight versus Senor Pink. This is different from everyone else because it's an actual fight. Nobody else has been a fight so far, and it doesn't quite fit the theme of sacrifice and loyalty I've been rambling about this entire time, but there is loyalty to it because he's fighting an enemy of Luffy's, so since it's an enemy, it's kind of like he's being loyal, you know what I mean? But we're not here to try to stretch that, so there's not really that, but there is a nothing happened aspect here. Frankie and Senor Pink are two men of men fighting it out, and they both have the utmost respect for each other. And I believe if they weren't on opposing pirate crews, these two could have been best friends. But just the fact that Frankie did what needed to be done and won the fight is where the nothing happened aspect comes in. His victory over Senor Pink is not one that he's going to flaunt and brag about. He wasn't necessarily proud to beat up Senor Pink. He knew this was a guy who was a genuine dude and had some definite issues with his past. And that's why I picked this moment to include in the video. I think their fight was definitely one of Frankie's best moments, and it really showed his character a lot. Alright, we're winding down. We have the last three. Next up is the Doctor, Tony Chopper. Chopper has what I think is one of the best nothing happened moments. I think it's probably top 3 out of all the Straw Hats, and it's maybe because he also includes the word nothing happened, and he actually does it before Zoro ever did it. So maybe Zoro was copying Chopper. We'll never know. So Chopper's nothing happened moment comes in Skypiea, where we have Zoro, Robin, Nami, Tarzaning off of the Mary, leaving Chopper all by his lonesome to watch after the ship. And that's when one of Enel's priests, Kira, comes and attacks Chopper on the ship, and Chopper had no way of beating this guy. He was nowhere near strong enough, and even Chopper today might still struggle against this guy. That guy Shura was pretty strong. Chopper even fell into the water at one point, and it wasn't until Gonfalve saved him that we may have never seen Tony Chopper again. But he did his best to protect the Mary. She did get a little bit damaged, but overall Chopper did his mission. He completed it. And when Zoro, Robin, and Nami came back, they asked Chopper if everything was alright, and Chopper said nothing scary happened. That might be the most perfect nothing happened moment other than the guy who created the nothing happened moment. Alright, next up is Jinbei. And from the day Jinbei met Luffy, he was doing things that showed his loyalty. You could say that, or you could just say he was being a good guy, because that's what he is. Jinbei's just an amazing dude. And I want to say an honorable mention for Jinbei is him staying behind and kind of sacrificing himself to make sure the Straw Hats made it out okay. But Jinbei's nothing happened moment came in Marineford, when he took a punch from Akainu while protecting Luffy. This was an amazing moment with Jinbei's character, especially since afterwards, even though he was still injured, he still helps talk sense into Luffy at Amazon Lily. You gotta remember, at this point, he only knew Luffy for like a couple days. Impel Down and Marineford were all in the same day. And the fact he already just took a punch from an admiral of the Marines to save Luffy after knowing him for less than a day, that shows a lot of his character. And I think in Fishman Island, Luffy mentions to the other tribes that Jinbei helped him, but I don't think he goes into great detail, so they don't know that Jinbei is quite literally the reason Luffy is alive. And finally, the last one is Luffy. There's just no way I could pick one moment that Luffy has like that stands out as nothing happened. Being the main character, he has some sacrifices he has to make every single arc. We see plenty of it in Wano. In Whole Cake Island, we saw his hunger strike sacrifice. I mean, the dude about starved himself to death. And it's just a theme that continues throughout every single arc. He's willing to make the sacrifices to save his crew, and that's what makes the dude an amazing main character and an amazing captain. I'll throw a few more examples out there, like when he saved Sanji and Nami on Drum Island, he helped carry Vivi's burden in Alabasta, the entire mission to go save Ace from Impel Down and Marineford, and I mentioned his hunger strike, but just overall going to Whole Cake Island in general to save Sanji. These are all moments that show Luffy's loyalty and sacrifice. Luffy is just that guy. He is him, and I just can't choose one moment that like outshines the rest, because without every single one of these moments, we don't necessarily get to where we are in the story today. Let me know if you guys want similar videos like this. I thought this was a pretty unique concept, and make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. It really helps me out, especially as a growing channel. So yeah, see you guys in the next video.